Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Dave Booker. Appreciate you being here. Again, we're going to continue on with Soleman Rogues Gallery. And today's chapter is On the Other Side. Curie and Oedipus took the bus into town again. Dressed in dark clothing, they were so difficult to distinguish that the men standing guard outside the mission missed them as they stealthily passed by. They arrived at the mission direct on time. Entering via the back door, they skirted the walls and found a dark corner to wait in. Tony was pacing the floor. I don't know what the hell is keeping the new guys. I figured they'd be early, not late. Any word from the guards outside? Frank checked. Well, they haven't passed them. Maybe they got cold feet. We never get cold feet, came a voice that seemed to emanate from the walls. Harry and Oedipus walked into the light grinning. Tony burst into laughter and had Frank calling the guards. Hell, some guards I got. These two not only passed you by, but got in here without none of us knowing. He slapped Harry on the shoulder. You boys sure you new to the game? Skill like that don't come overnight. Harry and Oedipus joined in the laughter, but said nothing. Dr. Nocturne arrived and led everyone out to the waiting truck and car. Sitting in the back seat, Oedipus asked what kind of doctor Nocturne was. Tony turned in the seat and shrugged. Not sure, he told me, but that damn big long word, sort of like a chiropodist. Oedipus nudged Perry, who just shrugged. Arriving at the mansion, the men spread out in front. Perry and Oedipus slunk to the rear. Stationing themselves, they checked their wrist projectiles, and Perry had a couple of weighted heels attached with a shoelace that he practiced throwing like a bola. The man emerged, they could stop him and truss him up quickly. Looking towards front, they saw Dr. Nocturne open the back of the van and emerge with the largest bat they'd ever seen. Smaller bats were clinging to his jacket. Short whistle, and the bats flew off into the mansion. From inside, they heard the scream of servants and their master. Out of the front flew one of the maids in her night attire, followed by what appeared to be the butler, half dressed and trying to get a bat out of his hair. The back door opened, and the master of the house ran out, followed by the enormous bat. Harry threw his heel bola, and the man tripped and fell as Oedipus beamed him with a hard rubber heel. They carried him to the front to be taken care of by the rest of the team. Tony had everyone except for Steve and Frank head inside to get what they could. Harry and Oedipus headed for the museum trophy room, while most of the others headed for the office. They opened the door into an Aladdin's Cave of Wonders. A cask of jewels, a small sculpture, a book of bonds, all found their way into Perry's arms. Oedipus likewise found small but valuable items, including a pincushion with needles that would fetch a high price even on the black market. As time was growing short, they went to the office and looked through the desk for anything the others had missed. There were several letters from the Victorian that Perry pocketed, as well as several notes that covered the same establishment. He also took a diary hidden in the side drawer behind a false back. Emerging out the front door, he saw the man had been named according to plan. Perry and Frank were instructed to bring him to his bedroom and minister to his wounds. Frank was competent and instructed Perry in making a sling. The man was tucked in, and Frank pulled Perry outside at top speed. Entering the back seat, Perry handed over his takings. Frank and Steve looked on the small takings and scoffed. Now, the jewels and bonds are all right, but what the heck you picked up those other crackerjack things beats me. Tony was examining the sculpture with a jeweler's loupe. My dear Frank, this sculpture will let us more than the rest of the takings together will bring. Oedipus handed over the pincushion, which set off the men in a gale of derision. Even Steve was dismissive of Oedipus's find. Tony examined each needle, then reached back and shook Oedipus's hand. You've done well, my son, extremely well. Steve's mouth dropped open. A bunch of needles, and you're saying he done good? Tony raised an eyebrow. Done well, Steve. He handed Steve a needle with a loop. Within the eye of each needle is a miniature sculpture. Each needle is worth up to 50,000. Yes, I'd say that was doing well indeed. Steve spent the drive back to the mission looking at the sculptures in awe. At the mission, the men sat around while the money was counted out and separated into stacks, one to each man. From the office, Tony brought out a chest of money which was added to the stacks. Now, this is from the sale of items from our last few trips. Dr. Nocturne was given a large stack of cash. He raised his hat and said good night. Perry and Oedipus said good night and departed. Frank was detailed to follow them, but dressed as they were, and with the skill of long practice, they were soon lost in the shadows. He came back disgruntled by his failure. Tony was sympathetic. Frank, I doubt you'd be able to track them. He patted Frank on the back and walked to the office. Halfway there, he turned around. You know, there's something fishy about those two. I feel we either work a great deal in our favor or will bring about our ruin. The meeting adjourned, and the valuables that had been collected were brought into the office safe. Harry and Oedipus had spent a long day and relaxed on the drive home. Emerging from the bus, they walked home in silence. The house was dark and the ladies in bed. The men went to the library for a nightcap. As they sat and drank, Perry emptied his pockets and deposited the contents in the desk drawer. Perry was exhausted, and so apparently was Oedipus, who was lying on his chair, fast asleep. Perry covered him with a blanket and toddled off to bed. The following morning, Perry decided to head to the shoebox and check if there were any messages or work to do. Pedowski was waiting for him. It'll be better than another one. Hop in the car and I'll take you there. In the car, Pedowski brought him up to speed. Well, we found out a few things about these men. Every one of them was living under an assumed name. They are the men who deposited their wives in the hospitals after beating them or causing them extreme suffering. We've arrested them, and they aren't talking. They all say that they have no memory of any of the women we've shown pictures of. They have no idea why they were singled out for beatings and disfigurement. Once at the crime scene, Perry got down on his hands and knees and scoured the area while Pedowski took a look around from above. On the ground were bits of solidified foam Tony used to incapacitate his victims. That was old information, no longer interesting. Looking around, they saw that about 5 people went in and out at great speed. Perry looked at one set of prints that was interesting to him. Yeah, I recognize these shoe marks. Remember at the bank, the man who was standing protectively in front of the women? Well, these prints are the exact same. He must have come in the van with his bats in the back. I think I have a line on who he is, too. As soon as I know for sure, I'll let you know. Going upstairs, they interviewed the victim and received the same story as the others. He had no idea why he had been attacked, other than because he was wealthy. No, he hadn't had a chance to look around and see what was taken. Perry picked up a picture of a beautiful woman. Looking up, he asked, "Very attractive, your wife?" The man snatched the picture and placed it face down on the bed. "No, she's just someone I once knew." His face drained of color and he turned towards the wall. Still looking away, he begged them to leave. Pedowski led Perry downstairs and outside. Perry looked around. "You want to look at the back of the house?" "No, there won't be much to find there. You can see the marks of the van and a car, but they're both in front. The gang were all standing in front too. You could see by the deep indentations that they were waiting. The back guy lets his creatures fly inside. They scare out the people, and then the lead guy traps them, works them over, and then for some reason tends to their injuries and puts them up in bed. Rather conscientious for a criminal who tortures his victims. In fact, there are plenty of odd things about this case I can't quite figure out. Well, I'm heading to the station to write my report. Give me a call next week if you find anything new. Ciao." Perry looked after Pedowski and shook his head. Seemed as if Pedowski was losing interest. Well, when they next meet, his interest would be restored. Yes, he was certain. Harry returned home for a late breakfast. On the table by his place was a gilt-edged envelope. His presence was requested at the Victorian that evening at 9. Persephone pulled out her own missive. We've all got one. What do you think it means? It's probably indoctrination. I've been expecting this. Where's Oedipus? He's in the garden with Cherin. I'll get them. When Oedipus and Cherin came in, they sat around the small table in the far corner, well away from the door. Harry placed a finger on the front of his lips and crept quietly to the door. Opening the door quickly, he saw Frederick, the butler, dusting off his trousers. Frederick, would you please bring in some sandwiches and a pitcher of lemonade? Certainly, sir. It will only take a moment. Harry walked back, thinking swiftly. Yeah, I thought we were under observation. Before I came in today, I laid down some shoe powder that was the exact color as the floor. Frederick was kneeling right in it. It is my feeling that we will be confronted by our servants at the meeting where they will give their report on our conduct. Fortunately, we have all kept up the pretense of Victorian living, so we should get a clean bill of health. The sandwiches arrived with a pitcher of lemonade. They were placed on the table, the maid bringing plates, glasses, and napkins. Persephone thanked them and informed them that they would ring when through. Harry locked the door with an old-fashioned key and left it in the lock, so the keyhole was blocked. Walking back to the table, he sat and thought while the others refreshed themselves. Cherin was thinking about the meeting that evening. There was no doubt in her mind that they would attend, but what would happen? She turned to Oedipus. Do you think they'll try and hypnotize me? I mean, isn't that how they would control us? Oedipus smiled and kissed her. No, darling. Hypnosis won't work, really. You can't be made to do what you wouldn't ordinarily do. More than likely, they'll drill into us the Victorian mode of living and behaving. Once they feel convinced that we are thoroughly indoctrinated, we'll find out their next steps. She cheered up a little and continued eating. Harry asked Persephone to accompany him to the corner of the room. You know, Cherin will very likely be indoctrinated quickly and easily. We can deprogram her once we return home. I want you to follow her lead and do as she does, but accomplish the change slower. You convert as fast as she will, though they're bound to know something's up. As for Oedipus and I, we'll have to work out sequence and reaction until we have them convinced of our complete brainwashing. More than likely, it will be a repetition of ideas and beliefs. I have a deprogramming tape at the shoebox. It's on the desk under the red shoe phone with instructions for any of us who are unaffected in an envelope. I just hope we're all strong enough to not require it. He went and unlocked the door and nodded for Persephone to ring for Frederick. Came in and picked up everything with the cook and maid following. Madam, with your permission, we will just clean up and then depart for the night. Since you are departing early and will be out all evening, I felt it only right to give everyone the night off. If that is permissible, then we shall clean up these dishes and then depart. Persephone smiled warmly on them. Yes, of course, you may all leave early. There's no point in you staying around doing nothing. We'll see you all on Monday. Hope you have a pleasant weekend. Harry followed them when they left, keeping well hidden. They were picked up by a limousine 2 blocks away. As far as Harry could tell, Victor was driving, and from the rapid-fire questioning, he was beginning his interrogation immediately. That evening, they got into their costumes, as Cherin was fond of calling their Victorian clothing. Arriving at the club, they knocked and waited to enter. All right, the next chapter is the Victorian Club. And then Hal McIntosh remembers. And then change of operations. So they're all pretty much the same length. So we'll probably do 3 more chapters next few days. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Glad you could come by and listen in. So I look forward to seeing you again on, what day is it? Friday. You know, when you're retired, you forget what day it is. So today is Friday. I will see you on Tuesday. I look forward to seeing you again. So be good and be good to yourself. Bye.